Welcome back to Ain't No Way MMA. Today we're going to be talking about the first UFC fight night of 2025.
I'm going to be honest, we're going to run through this, and I'm not going to be the happiest about it. I think Dana White built a horrible card. I don't know what he was thinking. This has the attention span of a 5-year-old, at least when it comes to the prelims. Usually the prelims are my favorite part of the fights, and maybe they still will be. I hope so. I hope there's some bangers just hiding in there, because from what I've seen with these matchups, I don't like almost all of the prelims. There's only about 2 or 3 fights I'm excited for, which is unfortunate. And to start off the shit show, we have a Joe Solecki versus Nurullo, Aliev. I don't know how to say his name. Dagestani. He's a 5-1 favorite for a reason. I really like Solecki. I want to like Solecki a lot in terms of the fight, but I don't think he's going to win. I think his jiu-jitsu is elite, but that's where the list ends. Solecki is leaving a lot to be wanted and in the terms of the striking, and Aliev just has better offensive wrestling. I think he smothers him for 2.5 rounds and probably submits him in the second. Solecki doesn't have the greatest gas tank or anything like that. So let's start off the card. It's pretty lame. And it only gets lamer. The next 3 fights, I'm not even going to talk about them. They're almost all UFC newcomers. And not only that, I don't know most of them. And I watched this religiously. Dana White really put on a snoozer card. Those last 3 fights were so bad. The Bellator has better prelims, which is saying a lot. Like I'm so disappointed. So we're just going to jump right in with Preston Parsons and Jacobe Smith. I think Preston Parsons has a lot of potential in the UFC, and I think he's extremely underrated. Every fight I've seen from him, he actually is really impressive. And I think it's interesting that he is a 4-1 underdog against Jacobe Smith. I know Jacobe Smith is 9-0 favorite. He should be the favorite. I agree. But maybe 2-1 at the very most. Preston Parsons is a really good grappler with fun striking and generally has a lot of talent in the UFC. He's still young. And so is Jacobe Smith. And I understand he's undefeated, but there's not that much more going for Jacobe Smith than there is Preston Parsons. I think there's a really good chance this fight's actually an upset. Next in the card, we actually have someone with some name recognition in Thiago Moises, and he's going against Trey Ogden. I've been seeing a lot of people on like Verdict, Reddit, etc. mention that they think Trey Ogden's going to win this fight, which is really interesting to me. I think Trey Ogden is like the definition of a decision merchant, and not only that, he's just generally not very good. I don't know if I can name a strength of Trey Ogden. I think he's generally just mid at everything, which is, better than being ass at wrestling and really good at striking, unless you're Alex Bejeda, of course, where that's a different echelon. But yeah, I don't think Trey Ogden really has an avenue for winning this fight. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but I really don't think he poses any sort of a threat. And I think he's probably going to lose this fight by decision. Thiago Moises has been old for a while, but he performs really well as an old man. He poses a threat for just about anyone in the lightweight division that's an up-and-comer. But Trey Ogden isn't an up-and-comer. He's just generally not very good at MMA. He's just average / below average at every skill. So he, skirts by at decisions, but he has no real talent and will not get anywhere in the UFC. And I think his run becomes a complete dead-end stop, period, with Thiago Moises. Next, we got some nobodies in Marcos Tulio and Ihor Potieria. The Ukrainian sucks. He's really bad. Ihor is generally just not entertaining. He gets really fluky wins every now and again. The Ukrainian-born native, Ihor Potieria, is 2-5 in the UFC, and I see people picking him as well. I don't understand it. I don't see a universe where he wins this fight. He's probably going to get flatlined. Down in the flyweight division, we've got Jose Johnson and Felipe Bunes. I think Felipe Bunes is actually a pretty good talent when it comes to his striking. He's got very good striking, decent grappling, and he comes on really strong on the first and second usually. Felipe Bunes is pretty known to gas out in the second half of round 2, and beyond there, he's just a slug. We saw it against Joshua Van. So I think it's interesting that he's not more of an underdog, but I can see why the odds are what they are. I think Jose Johnson probably puts the pressure on him, keeps his cardio up, and ends up with a TKO in round 3. If not, a decision 30-27. Now we're finally onto some fights that I feel like have some name recognition, some excitement behind it, some potential fight of the nights. And we're starting it off with Uroš Medić versus Punahele Soriano. The nice thing about Uroš Medić is I feel like he has a style most welterweights don't have. It's like a higher pace Shavkat Rakhmonov without the grappling. He's got, the spinning kicks, the flashy stuff, but he incorporates it well with his overall striking. He keeps his boxing guard high, but manages to mix in the kicks and knees with the distancing, which works out really well. And Punahele Soriano is generally a pretty average fighter in the welterweight division. I don't see him lasting very long with Uroš Medić. Medić is pretty well known for getting the first or second round TKOs, and I see that happening again in this fight. And for my fight of the night pick, I've got Austin Bashi and Christian Rodriguez. I like Christian Rodriguez a lot. I think he's extremely underrated. He's really good at busting these, new prospects, and we've got another one in Austin Bashi to see if he can withstand himself against Christian Rodriguez. And I really like Austin Bashi's style when it comes to what he did on Dana White's Contender Series. He's very athletic and he has very slick grappling, but a guy like Christian Rodriguez also has those things, and his anti-grappling is pretty elite. We saw it against Raul Rosas, and we saw it against a lot of other guys in the UFC. He did get guillotined by a guy like Julian Erosa, which makes me a bit upset, but I feel like Erosa has like one of those really deadly guillotines considering he got it in his last 2 fights. So I'm hoping the actually older fighter in Christian Rodriguez, who's usually the younger fighter, he's only 27, Austin Bashi being 23. We'll see how he lasts. I want to lean for Christian Rodriguez, but for being completely honest, Austin Bashi has extreme athletic potential to the difference of Christian Rodriguez, where he's just very, very skilled. It's kind of like, it's not a talent discrepancy. It's more of like an experience discrepancy, where Christian Rodriguez has a lot of UFC experience and Bashi's only fought on the regional scene and Dana White's Contender Series. But the way that Austin Bashi gets his wins is a lot more impressive than Christian Rodriguez. So we'll see who lasts, but this honestly is like a 50-50 fight for me. So it'll be exciting to see who wins. I want to say Bashi gets it done. It'd be great for his career, but I don't know.
Would you consider C-Rod a prospect killer?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what he is. He usually gatekeeps the top 15 for featherweight. Any guy who can get past him who's really young seems to thrive and get a ranking. And that's why Raul Rosas hasn't yet, because he doesn't have that same skill that a lot of other talents do have. Swinging on to what we have as the should-be main event, in my opinion. We've got Chris Curtis, Roman Kopylov. Great kickboxing matchup. These guys are both very exciting, in my opinion, especially when it comes to the striking. If Chris Curtis wanted to win this fight, all he would have to do is grapple. We've seen Kopylov against any sort of person that can grapple at all, and we know Chris Curtis can grapple, except when he fought Jack Hermanson, apparently. But let's forget that, because that was a fucking abysmal. It's interesting that Chris Curtis almost never chooses to go to the ground. If he did, I feel like he'd win a lot more fights. But we're talking about fight IQ here, and Chris Curtis doesn't have a whole lot of that, considering the brain damage he has from training with Sean Strickland. I want to say Kopylov gets it done, probably with some kicks, and skirts out a really good decision, stay on the outside. But if Chris Curtis can actually impose himself and keep the pressure high, maybe get some takedowns against the fence and some ground and pound, I think Chris Curtis gets it. If Chris Curtis can show he's improved and has fight IQ, I think he wins. But if there's no improvement, Kopylov skirts away with a decision or a head kick KO. I'm going to be honest. Every time I gamble on Abdul Razak Alhassan, he gets flatline KO'd. It's just kind of a beautiful relationship I have with gambling. Whenever I gamble on someone, they just like to die. And I'm going to tell you right now, I'm putting money on Abdul Razak Alhassan. He's fighting Cesar Almeida, who is a former opponent of Alex Pereira, but it's really interesting. Every fight I've seen Cesar Almeida fight so far, his kickboxing has been generally unimpressive. When it comes to a lot of middleweights, they know how to kickbox. There's some really good kickboxers in middleweight. We just talked about two of them, Roman Kopylov and Chris Curtis, but I really don't think Cesar Almeida has aged well and gracefully into the UFC. I think they're pushing his name really hard because he is a glory kickboxer. They did that with Dustin Jacobe at some point, and they've done that with Alex Pereira as well. I think they do that with most guys who come from glory kickboxing because it's one of the most prestigious organizations outside of the UFC when it comes to kickboxing. But I don't think Cesar Almeida's game translates well to the UFC. His grappling's really bad, and I can't see a world where Abdul Razak Alhassan doesn't mix up the grappling to striking and then catches them maybe with a knee or a really hard head kick. I think that's his path to victory, and I see him getting it done in the second or third. I don't know. I'm every time I gamble on this man, he likes to get flatline KO'd like Andy's coming and my name's Woody. It's absolutely tragic. I try not to be too biased when it comes to fights or too hateful, right? Because certain guys just grind my gears. And one of those guys is Carlston Harris. I think Carlston Harris has genuine talent, but I think he is a dirty cheat. He loves to hit the back of the head, lots of nut shots, lots of eye pokes. Generally a entertaining fighter when he gets to the point of a finish, but he loves to smash the back of the head for a finishing sequence. Shout out Impa Kasanganai. But, I'm going to let that go today. And he's fighting a guy in Santiago Ponzinibbio who's definitely past his prime and a cardiovascular machine with really good volume output. If Carlston Harris can get his striking off and keep the distance, he probably knocks out Santiago Ponzinibbio kind of in a similar fashion to Kevin Holland. But if he can't impose his pressure and pick out from the outside, land his shots correctly, I see Santiago Ponzinibbio pressuring him against the cage, just volume destroying him and getting a Max Holloway 30-27. By the way, how cringe is that? That was the co-main event of the fight night. I don't understand how that's the co-main event. I genuinely don't understand that. It's horrible co-main event. We could have put 3 other fights from this card alone in the co-main event. Austin Bashi, Christian Rodriguez, or Chris Curtis Kopylov. I think you even could put Cesar Almeida above him, but I don't know how that's the co-main event. No one really cares about the fight, and there's no any sort of implications for a ranking or any sort of thought towards that. So it's really interesting that made the co-main event. Mackenzie Dern, the baddie herself, versus Amanda Ribas. We love Mackenzie Dern, but this baddie, she ain't getting it done. I don't know. All right. I like Ribas in this matchup. I think she wins. Probably a boring decision. Probably goes all 5 rounds and maybe some exciting stuff in the middle where a head kick lands, there'll be a little wobble here and there because Mackenzie Dern's chinny. This is the most feminine matchup of 2025, and we're just starting the year. I don't know what Dana White's thinking. We should put some brutal women up there, but instead we've got some fairies. They're very talented, don't get me wrong, but they're not what comes to mind when I think of the first main event of 2025. And that kind of sums up this card.